Hello everyone, this is Ted Bauman here with your Friday Bauman Daily video. First, let me apologize if you hear some banging and popping in the background. My garage got hit by a tree a while back and I'm having to rebuild it. I've got some buddies over doing some work on it right now. This week I want to talk about something very different. I'm typically speak about big picture stuff. I talk about the economy. I talk about specific investment opportunities where I see them. Today, I want to talk about an investment opportunity that has got me very excited. And it's one that really is sparked, to use the term, by what's been happening in California recently. Now, as some of you may know, I am South African and I have a home in Cape Town. And what's interesting about Cape Town, besides the fact that it's the most beautiful city on the planet, is that it's very much like the coastal California regions. It has very similar climate. It looks a lot like Southern California, actually mid-California, and it has some of the similar problems. One of those problems is energy. The other one is wildfires. And the California situation got me thinking about what people are doing to resolve those problems. Now, in a nutshell, California has got two interlinked sets of problems. One is that it is a massively vulnerable area in terms of wildfires, and the other one is that it has a power system that regularly sparks wildfires because high tension transmission lines and substations often fail or spark in some way that can cause dry tinder to catch light. This happens in Cape Town as well. We get regular fires on the mountains, sometimes right above my house in Cape Town, and it's just a fact of life down there. Not as bad as what's happening in California, but it's a big deal. Anyway, this is the point. California is the most advanced state in the United States when it comes to renewable energy generation. It now supplies close to 1/3 of their energy requirements under the right conditions on sunny, windy days. But there's a big flaw in the system, and I want to talk about why that flaw really opens up the opportunity for forward-thinking investors. The problem with renewable energy generation is that it depends primarily on the sun. Solar power is becoming, well, it already is a cheaper source of energy than any other source of energy per megawatt hour. It is by far cheaper than fossil fuels already, and people who are not aware of that, it is quite a striking fact. As a result, we're seeing an explosion of investment in solar power generation, largely through photovoltaic panels. Now, PV panels can be used in one of two ways. You can either put big, huge bunches of them together, generate power from a big system that is a centralized system that is based somewhere like in the Mojave Desert, or you can put them on the roofs of buildings, whether residential or commercial. Now, here's a chart that shows what happens when you create a system that is dependent on renewable energy. This chart was developed as an exercise by Wood Mackenzie to show what would happen in a situation like the polar vortex that occurred a couple years ago if the United States, the central and eastern part of the U.S. had depended entirely on the renewable energy sector. Now, as you can see, those big dips in the bottom basically show you what would have happened, the gap between energy demand and energy supply. Basically, it means that the lights would have to go out because there wouldn't be enough power available. So this is a problem in California as well. One of the big issues that they have is that on some days, their renewable energy sector generates so much power that they have to sell it to other states at a discount, practically giving it away, lest it overwhelm their grid with too much juice. On other days, of course, and particularly at night, there isn't enough power to run the system. This is what caused the rolling blackouts in California recently. The fact that it was exceedingly hot at night meant that a lot of Californians were running their air conditioners at a lower temperature and for longer than they normally do. Rolling blackouts are something that are very familiar to any South African. They happen all the time, unfortunately, for very different reasons. But again, a similarity between the two. So here's what got me interested. The big issue here is that you need to be able to store energy if you're going to go to renewables. Now, I know a lot of people are excited about batteries. They particularly, any Tesla fans out there know that battery technology is critical to making the whole thing work. The problem is that there are different schools of thought about how to proceed. One school says that you should have a centralized system, and the other says you should have a decentralized system. And here's a chart that shows you the different types. On the left, you see, basically you could go for large-scale power plants, which means centralized distribution, which means high-tension wires, which means basically supplying power to households who just pay for it. The other system, the decentralized system, means that you have lots of smaller producers. You have decentralized grids that are all linked together. You have a smaller scale transmission, particularly of direct current. You basically have the possibility of households actually generating power through solar energy panels and feeding it into the grid when they have too much. Now, I have friends in Cape Town who do something very similar. A friend of mine down there has been basically using solar power for the last 20 years because the power company, the city of Cape Town and the utility said to him, sorry, if you want us to connect to your house, because it's literally the furthest south house in the municipal boundaries, then you'll have to pay for pylons, high tension wires, and a substation. So he said, nope, I'm not going to do that. So he started developing solar. Key thing is, the first thing he did was to basically investigate battery technology, because there's no point in having a power system that only works when the sun's out, particularly in parts of the country where you get substantial cloud cover, like the Pacific Northwest. So essentially, this idea, the idea of how to create a robust, reliable, efficient system leads you to the question of large-scale energy storage. Now, there are a number of ways to do this. One is obviously through the use of batteries. There are others. There are things like compressed air. There are flywheels. But ultimately, there is nothing as reliable and as efficient, really, as a good battery system. If you're going to go for other kinds of systems like compressed air, you have to have underground caverns that can hold it, that are airtight. Other systems have other issues that raise the cost. For example, flywheels, you've got maintenance and all of that. Bottom line is, the future of distributed electricity systems is going to be in battery technology, not just generation. Now, here's a chart that shows the growth of different types of power sources in the United States projecting to 2025. And as you can see, the really big growth is going to come from solar photovoltaic power. Now, that means essentially that if you're going to get that amount of basically distributed energy being produced by solar panels, you're going to need systems to store it, right? Because sometimes there is too much energy being generated for current demand, which is not good for the grid. And B, sometimes there isn't enough energy. So I did some digging and I looked at the various ETFs that hold solar and renewable power systems companies that are active in this space. And it was a very interesting thing because it shows some things that I certainly didn't expect to see myself. So here's a chart that shows these ETFs and how they compare over the last 1 year with the S&P 500, which is the blue area. Now, at the very, very top is an ETF called QCLN. And essentially, that is an ETF that specializes in clean energy production. And it's not just about or production, storage, use, whatever. And it's not just full of Teslas. In fact, all of these ETFs have positions in Tesla and similar companies, but really the biggest chunk of their investments is in companies that are active in the solar industry. In other words, the ones who generate power and create systems to do that, and the ones, most importantly, who are active in developing storage technology. At the opposite end, and this is the fascinating thing, the thing that seems so counterintuitive, it's difficult to see. There's a bit of gold yellow line, it has underperformed the S&P, and that is an ETF called BAT, B-A-T-T. And the reason for that is because it is primarily invested in the lithium supply chain, which is obviously part of the lithium-ion battery approach technology. But the problem here is that there's been an oversupply of lithium relative to demand, and the price has fallen. So just where you'd think to look if you're trying to invest in batteries or get in on the action long term on energy storage, you might be attracted to that one, but that one is the dog of the bunch. Also, kind of far down there, the next lowest one after that is FAN, F-A-N, and that's wind power. And interestingly enough, wind power is more expensive at this point than solar for a number of reasons. Partly because it is inherently unreliable in the sense that it relies on the wind, whereas sun is always there, but also because it tends to generate opposition. People don't like the big turbines. Anybody who's been in Central Europe, for example, or even I passed a big bunch of them in Illinois, will know that they are enormous, and they, some people don't like the sight of them. That's not a direct cost, but it does lead to opposition. Now, the next one up after that red line, is actually the one that is focused on the battery electrical vehicle sector. Now, think about that for a second. Everybody's so hot on Tesla. They're hot on companies like Nikola and Workhorse that have recently had big run-ups, in Nikola's case, because of its alliance with GM. But really, the biggest performers are all in the space around solar energy. TAN, T-A-N, PBW. These are ETFs that really focus on solar generation, distribution, and increasingly on storage. And as you can see, they have just heavily outperformed the market this year. I mean, at one point, QCLN was up 100% just in a year, whereas right now we're looking at a slightly more than 10% gain year on year in the S&P 500. So that's my message for today. I'm bullish on this sector. If you go and look at those ETFs, you will be able to look at their holdings and see the companies that they are involved, or not that they hold. Now, you'll see some usual suspects. I know a lot of people who are aware of the solar opportunity invest in a couple of consistent companies that everybody likes. But here's the thing. There are some sleepers out there. There are companies that are dramatically undervalued relative to the market as a whole, and that's unnecessary. It's largely because people are not aware of what they're doing. And in fact, in my next Bauman Letter report, which is about to come out, we are going to have a big discussion of just such a company. So if you're interested, please consider subscribing to the Bauman Letter. We have a link below that will allow you to do that. So that's my message for today. If you're thinking about renewable power, you're thinking about batteries, forget the cars for now, focus on the energy system as a whole and look for the companies that are gearing up to be able to address that urgent need. That's it for me. I'll talk to you next week.